2021 was my biggest year so far for travel. I went on a full dozen trips, which if you'd like to hear about the best memories, I have a recent video ranking my favorite ones. But this long list of trips came with the addition of 216 new roller coaster credits. This is substantial and nearly doubled my coaster count. I felt as if some fiber in my body was urging me to go out there and live my life at a young age since I had the privilege and resources to do it. And I only mention this because I traveled so much I topped my number of new credits in 2020, which was my previous best, by over 3 times. In this video, I want to take a look back at my favorite new coasters of last year and stack them up in a top 25 list. But there is one exception, and that's that any cloned coasters I'd ridden in prior years isn't able to make this list. A prime example of this would be Railblazer at California's Great America, which would have made the top 10 but wasn't a fully new experience since I rode Wonder Woman Golden Lasso coaster at Six Flags Fiesta Texas in 2020. Anyways, let's dive into the video. These are my top 25 favorite new roller coasters of 2021. Number 25, Monster at Adventureland. Iowa's largest coaster to date is one that I was so impressed with. While I can't find it in me to put it any higher, I almost wish I could because this ride experience is amongst the most fun I've had on any coaster. The hang time forces, positive forces, lateral forces formulate a super well-rounded layout. The team at Gerstlauer did the best they possibly could with this ride, which is why if you haven't ridden Monster, it should be way higher on your bucket list. Number 24, Superman Ride of Steel at Six Flags America. This underrated intimate hypercoaster also pleasantly caught me by surprise. The ride has plenty of airtime to satisfy everyone, and the funky layout pulls more positives and raw speed than I think most people give it credit for. Plus, it's just a very smooth coaster, and a back row seat is fantastic. I think Superman deserves more love than it receives. Number 23, Prowler at Worlds of Fun. Every time I think about this GCI wooden coaster, I'm taken back by how much fun it was. The sheer pacing and speed of this coaster, combined with the constant airtime, terrain elevation change, and positives, make it loads of fun. It basically has everything you could want in a GCI, with the only thing that could really make it better is fill in that middle section to make it a bit better there, and also get rid of the seatbelts. Other than that, it's no wonder this is Worlds of Fun's best coaster, and sorry, it's not remotely close. Number 22, Thunderhead at Dollywood. Speaking of phenomenal GCIs, this ride was much more powerful than I expected. It has airtime in all corners, great pacing, and one thing I loved about it is it seemed to get progressively better throughout the ride. Where most GCI coasters dim out towards the end, Thunderhead builds up more speed to keep up the strong pacing and ends out in a bang. Plus, the difference of high and low elements in the first and second half is a better blend than I think a lot of you realize. For me, Thunderhead is a clear number 2 coaster at Dollywood, which is saying something because this park has a world-class collection of coasters. Number 21, Copperhead Strike at Carowinds. This mock multi-launch coaster was so much more complete than I was anticipating. Other than the launches, which were pretty weak, every element on this ride seemed to do its job fantastic. The hang time moments were very pronounced, especially with only a lap bar. The airtime moments ranged from floater to ejector to flow ejector. And the pacing was on and off kind of like Monster, but I mean that in the best way possible. Copperhead Strike is such a diverse ride, and combined with its theming makes it a truly fantastic launch coaster. Number 20, Alpengeist at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. My current favorite coaster at Virginia's Busch Gardens is this absolutely monstrous B&M invert. The ride is a powerhouse from start to the mid-course brake run, but from there, the ride does die out considerably, and I think that's the biggest drawback with Alpengeist. Despite this, the first half is so good that its flaws are outshadowed. The pacing and whip in the elements are outrageous and had me coming back for more rides. Even at a day where it was busy and we had to prioritize what we wanted re-rides on, Alpengeist was always our first resort. Number 19, Joker at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. Wow guys, I'm almost appalled by how a ride this good gets any hate. I say this with no bias since I wasn't much of a fan of the park, but Joker is amazing. Its blend of airtime and strong inversions made it so memorable, and that's something I really appreciated. Plus, the airtime had the same wild negative Gs as the other RMCs, which is something I was worried about going in, but sure enough, this coaster was flying. If it weren't for Joker, I'd say it isn't worth going a far distance for Discovery Kingdom, but the simple fact that this coaster exists has me recommending the park all the way. Number 18, Incredible Hulk at Islands of Adventure. Similar to Alpengeist, Hulk is a coaster that has a dull second half, but one who's completely outshadowed by the first half. The series of elements right away are superb, with that well-themed launch tunnel, solid upwards punch, 0G roll, and then the craziest gray out of my life except for one other one I can think of. These inversions are so whippy it's disgusting. Seriously, B&M would never do something like this nowadays. Hulk is a prime example of a good quality old school B&M and became one of my favorites from the manufacturer. Number 17, Twisted Cyclone at Six Flags Over Georgia. The smallest RMC iBox coaster makes up for its size in its bite. While I didn't find its airtime to be any stronger than the other RMCs like a lot of you said, I do have to commend this ride for its pacing. From start to end, you are hauling through the course and there's really so few dead spots. Something about the flow of this coaster was really fun and something I enjoyed quite a lot. I think that's what ultimately kept me coming back for more rides because sure, the layout is short, but they chose some of the best elements to keep you entertained. Number 16, Aftershock at Silverwood. The rare giant inverted boomerang clones have had a mixed reputation because of the mess that was Goliath at Six Flags New England. But what this did is hid the quality of the others from those who hadn't had the chance to ride one, which keep in mind you can only find these rides in Idaho, Spain, China, and Russia, so they're kind of uncommon. Aftershock was the first and only one I'll have gotten the chance to do for a long time, but I'm so glad I had the opportunity. The pacing and intensity of these clones are absurd to the point where the only times you'll be able to catch your breath are on these terrifying vertical lift hills. Such a powerful ride, such a unique experience, and I think that's the recipe for a truly fantastic coaster. Number 15, Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure at Islands of Adventure. One of the most well-themed coasters out there, is more of a family ride than a thrill ride, but the whole experience and layout really makes it for me. This thing has bunches of animatronics, immersive architecture, 7 launches, a drop track, and a reverse segment. Literally everything from Intimate's family coaster portfolio was pulled out and used for the making of Hagrid's. The amount of things this coaster is able to perform is mind-blowing and makes it a world-class coaster despite its tame appearance. Number 14, Boss at Six Flags St. Louis. This will probably be one of the more unpopular entries on this list, because many of you don't like Boss much at all, and many of you think it's just okay. Then there's a small percentage of enthusiasts who go crazy over this ride, and I'm one of them. After riding it 24 times in the daytime, nighttime, and in all sorts of different seats, I have to commend Boss for one thing in specific, and that's the pacing. A lot of people like to give this factor flack for its dull middle section, which I agree doesn't do much, but I look at it as a breather. Everything else is so fast, so intense, and so powerful. Something about Boss and its scale makes it one of the most intense coasters I've ever ridden, and as long as you avoid a wheel seat, I think many of you should be able to appreciate it. Number 13, Renegade at Valleyfair. One of GCI's best coasters in the country has a masterful layout from top to bottom. One of the manufacturer's strong suits, it seems, are these high off the ground turns that give pops of airtime going in and out of them, and Renegade performs these beautifully. Plus, there's an amazing combination of this with low to the ground turns that add a lot to the ride's intensity. Really, this is about as good as it gets for a GCI of its size, though we'll talk about one later that amplifies Renegade's strengths further. Number 12, Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England. I know this coaster is really low, but I just can't say I was that impressed with it. Granted, I only got one ride and it was raining, so it may have been possible it was running slow, but I remember that ride pretty well, and I was just disappointed, guys. Elements of the ride, like the pacing and layout, do pop, but others get in the way, like the restraints and somewhat meandering spaghetti bowl section. I know I'm in the oddball here with finding this coaster overrated, so as of now, I'll gladly deem this the number 1 coaster I need to re-ride. Number 11, Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City. I know some people had mixed feelings on the spinning feature when this ride was first announced, but seriously, Mach knocked it out of the park with this concept. The way you're now able to take all sorts of inversions and airtime maneuvers in different directions is awesome. Plus, since it is a free spinning train, your ride experience is going to be completely different every time. Regrettably, I only had the time to do 3 rides on Time Traveler, but I easily could have gone for more. This is one of the most fun and re-rideable coasters in the world. Number 10, Stunt Pilot at Silverwood. While I mentioned Railblazer wouldn't be on this list because it is an exact replica of Wonder Woman Golden Lasso coaster, this ride is at least slightly different. Its layout was modified just a little bit to make more of a comfortable ride experience possible, but really it's still about as intense as it gets. Other than maybe the dive loop, none of the elements were made any worse, and some, like the twisted airtime hill, were actually improved upon. It seems like every time I have my doubts going into an RMC, I'm still thoroughly impressed, and Stunt Pilot is no different. Number 9, Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia. North America's best B&M hypercoaster has absolutely 0 dead spots. You look at a ride like Mako or Behemoth, which are my 2 favorites after Goliath, and their second halves are kinda meh. Goliath, on the other hand, has no mid-course brake run and ends out in 3 consecutive ejector airtime hills. Seriously, what other B&M hyper offers ejector airtime, because I couldn't tell you. Additionally, I love how this ride exits the park and has certain compact elements that make it possible, like the toilet bowl helix. Goliath's combination of insane positive Gs, breakneck pacing, and floater and ejector airtime is unheard of for a B&M hypercoaster, which is why I couldn't get enough of Goliath. Number 8, Superman El Ultimo Escape at Six Flags Mexico. Morgan Manufacturing has a mixed reputation in the coaster world because, let's face it, rides like Wild Thing and Mamba kind of suck. But it seems like they took one of these layouts, twisted it to oblivion, and upped the intensity by 100 with Superman. Almost every element is so intense in the lateral and airtime department, and then the return leg has no trim brakes at all. I couldn't believe just how fantastic this coaster's pacing was and how amazing its layout was. It had me wondering why Morgan couldn't pull a Superman at all these other Cedar Fair parks. Number 7, Goldstriker at California's Great America. I talked about Renegade and how its layout is about as good as it gets, combining low to the ground and high off the ground sections. But somehow, Goldstriker takes these elements and enhances them considerably. They are made to be more intense, more fast-paced, and the execution literally is flawless. I also have to say that I was not expecting this ride to feel this long. Every time it felt like it was going to end, it kept on going, but not in a way where it seemed to be losing speed, because the whole time you're flying on this ride. I have to give Railblazer credit where credit's due and deem that the number 1 ride in CGA, but seriously, this thing is right on its tail, and it's a very close second place. Number 6, Outlaw Run at Silver Dollar City. This is a ride that sits in a strange position for me because back when I rode it in August, I'd almost tell you that it was the slightest bit disappointing. But nowadays, when I think back to my rides on Outlaw Run, I get so excited thinking about the elements. Or maybe it isn't the elements as much and more about how this coaster just runs. It's currently the only full topper track coaster I've done by RMC, and the way it rides, its texture I suppose, is perfect, especially in that wooded setting. There were small issues I had with this ride, particularly the short length relative to other RMCs, and I also don't like hang time that much, but still, this coaster feels like a bucking bronco in how it runs. It's always thrashing you around, tearing the track apart, and that really says so much about Outlaw Run in my opinion. Number 5, Medusa Steel Coaster at Six Flags Mexico. One of RMC's best paced coasters can be found on the outskirts of Mexico City and is a fantastically sequenced ride. Medusa is great by day, but is indescribable at nighttime. Very few coasters that I've ridden warmed up like this thing did, so after sunset it was just tearing through its elements. The way it combines grace in its inversions and speed sections, but then you have these intense -G airtime hills is awesome. Medusa seems to feel distinguishably different compared to other RMCs, which I wasn't expecting but definitely was a strong suit of Medusa. Number 4, Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. Probably RMC's most polarizing coaster, has a crazy long layout that some would tell you has no dead spots, whereas others would say it really dies out towards the end. When I rode this coaster, the track was wet, and supposedly the ride was running flawless in 2021 overall, so combine these two things together and you've got a winner on your hands. The elements kept flinging me out of my seat before transitioning into smooth, graceful inversions and weird outward banked turns. It almost reminded me of Twisted Cyclone at Six Flags Over Georgia, but amped up by 100. Almost with more spice thrown into its layout, meaning yes, this coaster was absolutely amazing. Number 3, Lightning Rod at Dollywood. So this is one of those coasters that's at the tip top of your bucket list had you not ridden it before. Obviously, I was this way too, but the only problem is that I never got to try it in its original wooden form. I only had the chance to do it this past summer, meaning I needed to accept the slower feel of the ride, steel tracking, and cut down trees surrounding the coaster. These things made the ride experience noticeably worse than past years from what I've heard, but I wouldn't exactly know since I have nothing to compare it to. So in conclusion, what I got was a slightly disappointing ride by morning, but the more it warmed up, the more I seemed to like it. The sequencing of Lightning Rod's elements is about as good as it gets, and the pacing is really unique for an RMC. Plus, the setting is mind-blowing on ride since you can't see any of what comes after the launch waiting in the queue line. I could definitely see this being as good as people once said had it hauled through the elements a little bit faster and rode in a similar fashion to Outlaw Run with that wooden topper track. But still, as is, Lightning Rod is a fantastic roller coaster and makes the top 3 on my new 2021 roller coasters list. Number 2, Jurassic World Velocicoaster at Islands of Adventure. Upon opening, this ride had received nothing but praise, and I can safely say after riding that the hype is real. Even after entering the queue line, you can see that all of the theming is what kickstarts your experience, not just the ride itself. But then when the ride does begin, you are treated to a phenomenal layout. The first half winds all around itself in the Raptor paddock and has several surprise moments of airtime. The second half is where Velocicoaster goes full steam on the gas and rips through all sorts of inversions, airtime moments, and wonky transitions. It's been a long wait for Intamin's return to the States, but I think we can all agree that the wait was worth it for this coaster by itself. Number 1, Fury 325 at Carowinds. This was a no-brainer for me because if you'd asked me what my new favorite coaster of last year was, Fury would be the first to come to mind. This coaster found its way in my top 5 after just one ride and got progressively better throughout the day as well. The fact that matters is that Fury feels nothing like other B&M coasters, not even their other Giga coasters. Its raw speed is insane, the pacing is some of the best in the world, the elements pack in heavy positive Gs, and there's surprise moments of airtime coming out of all sorts of turns. It's almost like Carowinds said, okay B&M, build a coaster with no budget, and this is what they came up with. It's hard to imagine that they could have done anything to make this ride better, which is why Fury 325 hits the top spot on this list. But hey, don't let that overshadow the other amazing coasters I rode last year too. 2021 was the most eventful year I've had for travel, but I can't wait to find out if 2022 will top it. Spoiler alert, I'm pretty confident it will. But until next year's list, that's all I have for you guys today, so thank you all so much for tuning in, and I'll see you very, very soon. Bye guys.